Hey everyone, my name is Natalie, and today I'll be talking about my journey with schizophrenia. And I just got off a long day from work, so I apologize in advance if my voice is a bit scratchy or if I stumble on my words. So I'm the first person in my family to have received a college degree. I'm also the first person in my family to have been diagnosed with a mental illness. As you probably already know, Asians and Asian Americans don't really talk much about mental illness. And in fact, less than 9% of Asian Americans go seek help compared to 18% of the general population in the United States. For me, there were probably some signs I was schizophrenic before I found myself waking up in a hospital. But because we as a society don't talk much about it, I didn't see the signs until it was too late. Like many Asian Americans living outside of the US, my dream was to move to America as soon as high school was over. Get a good college degree, get a good job at a tech firm, get married, have some kids, move back to Asia, take care of your family, and then retire here. I grew up in the Middle East, but I moved to Taiwan right before high school, and here I attended Taipei American School, TAS. And like I said before, even though I wasn't American, my dream was to move to America. I decided on Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. I wanted to try something different from my peers, and I wanted to go to a small school, so it seemed like the perfect fit. And after I graduated, I was supposed to come back to Taiwan to take a break and start applying for jobs. But I knew that if I came back to Taiwan, my chances were going to be slim to none if I was trying to find a job in the US. So instead, I decided to skip my flight, call up my best friend, and ask if I could stay with him over the summer until I found a job. Fast forward a couple of months. I was lucky enough to land an internship at an Amazon subsidiary called Zappos, based in Las Vegas, so I moved there right around the end of summer. Sorry, I'm so nervous. Forgive me. My internship experience was everything that I imagined a tech company would be like. There were video games in the elevators, there were beer stations on every floor, there were massage chairs on the highest floor, the 13th floor, and I thought I was so lucky to be here. For 6 years in a row, Zappos had been named one of the best companies to work for by Fortune 100, and reality didn't disappoint. At the end of my 6-month internship, I had to make a decision. Plan A was to try to get a full-time position at Zappos. Plan B was to find another job in the United States. I didn't even consider coming back to Asia at the time. And right around the end of my internship, the company decided to make this huge structural change. The CEO sent out a memo that said, basically, we want to turn into a flatter organization. So there are certain positions that were going to be moved around. If you were a manager, for example, you would no longer be a manager by the end of the month. If you didn't like the direction this company was going, you could take this very generous severance package and leave. So then in the spring of 2015, my manager took the offer, her manager took the offer, and the VP of marketing, who was his manager, decided to leave as well. Within the span of 2 weeks, I was reporting directly to the COO of a 1,500-person company, asking him to approve my time cards. Since I was the only person left in that company that knew how to run that particular marketing channel, it was immediately decided by the higher-ups that they would help me secure a visa and bring me on as a full-time coordinator at Zappos. In the next 2 years, I learned so much, and my experience was absolutely priceless. In fact, I wouldn't be where I am today without it. But it was also quite chaotic because 13% of the company decided to leave, and a lot of managers left. And with them, they took their connections, their experience, and their knowledge. And people like me were left behind, people who didn't have any of these things. So because of that, I put a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on myself to try to outperform and push my limits. And that stress, that pressure triggered my schizophrenia, though I didn't realize it at the time. So for those of you who don't know, schizophrenia is usually characterized by abnormal behavior, disorganized speech, and being out of touch with reality. So you think something is real, but it's not, or you think something is not real and it's actually real. For me, I started hearing things that weren't there, but I chalked it off as stress and ignored it. I remember the night I went to the hospital. I hadn't eaten or slept for 3 days in a row. I couldn't sleep because every time I tried to lay down, I would hear voices playing right beside my ear, as if there were people sitting next to my bed having these conversations with me. And I couldn't eat because I wasn't sleeping for 3 days. I lost my appetite. And I realized then by the 3rd day that I really needed help. So I called an Uber to try to take me to the closest hospital. But as I was walking down the stairs of my apartment, the voice in my head, the schizophrenic voice in my head, was telling me that I was being ridiculous, just go back upstairs and try to go to sleep. So I canceled the Uber and went back upstairs. And I was drifting in and out of sanity at this point. So I realized it was an emergency. Someone had to force me to go to the hospital. So I asked my then boyfriend at the time to call 911, and an ambulance came. And when the ambulance came, there were about 4 EMTs that came out, and they tried to coax me into the ambulance. And I didn't even believe they were real. I thought they were actors. I asked to check their license, I asked to check their badges, and I wouldn't get in the ambulance with them because I thought it was just a TV show or something. And the more I tried to fight, the more I tried to resist, the more pressure they put on me, to the point where eventually I was physically fighting them off, and they had to push me down and tranquilize me. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the psych ward of a hospital close by. At the time, I stayed there for about 2 to 3 days. My uncle in California came to visit me to make sure I was okay, and then he called my mom, who was living in Taiwan at the time, and she flew over immediately, bought a ticket and flew over to make sure that I was okay. And after that, after I was discharged, we called psychiatrist after psychiatrist after psychiatrist, but the shortest wait was about 3 months long. We called about 20 psychiatrists. And I don't know if it's because maybe there are a lot of mentally ill people in Las Vegas, or because in America, healthcare is just not that accessible. Either way, I realized in order to be happier and healthier, I had to move back to Taiwan, where healthcare was basically free and extremely accessible. And then I realized that my American dream was not my own dream. It was the product of social standards. And when I had this clarity, I immediately packed up my bags and moved back to Taiwan. So let me tell you a little bit more about schizophrenia. It affects about 1% of the population worldwide. It's usually characterized by abnormalities in emotion, in speech, and in behavior. Some common experiences include hallucinations, so you hear or you see or you feel things that aren't there. Delusional thinking, so having these really firm beliefs, even though there's a lot of evidence that contradicts it. And abnormal outward appearances, so dressing really strange, or having wild hair, or walking around aimlessly, or talking or mumbling to yourself. And even though there's not one reason or one cause for schizophrenia, a lot of experts agree that it's a combination of a few factors. The first one is genetics, the second one is environment, and the third one is psychosocial support. And there are some common myths and misconceptions about schizophrenic people. So sometimes movies will portray schizophrenia as violent people. Actually, this is not true at all. People who have schizophrenia are more likely to harm themselves than anyone else, and they're 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide than the average person. And with the right treatment, and with the right environment, and with the right psychosocial support, 25% of schizophrenic people will recover completely, and 50% of schizophrenic people will see a vast improvement in their symptoms. So it's been about 2.5 years since I was first diagnosed with schizophrenia. I take meds every day, I go see the doctor once a month, and my schizophrenic symptoms still surface every now and then. But I am in a much better place than I ever was back then. I'm surrounded by friends and family. I'm working at a job that I love with a guy I can't live without. Even though my experience in America was absolutely life-changing, I don't know if I could ever go back to live there. And if you were to take away one thing from this talk, this is it. Asia might not be the first place you think of for getting help for mental illness, but I can assure you that if you're looking for it, you can find it here. Thank you for listening.